Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bite Size Balance. I have a really fun guest with me from Australia today, Amy Armstrong. Hi, Amy. How are you?
Hi, Wendy. I'm good. Thank you.
I was just saying to Amy, I'm in the process of moving as we record this, and I removed all the furniture from my office, which I realize might be a bad idea. Hopefully there's not a major echo here, but normally the carpets and the couches and stuff absorb the sound. But I'm hoping you guys will just bear with me because you love me. And you have some sympathy for me in my empty nester situation, trying to get two kids off to college and also downsize and move from my house. So let me introduce you, Amy, first, just so people have a sense of who you are and why I wanted to have you on the podcast. Amy's got such a cool story. And we've never had anyone on to talk about the specific specialty that Amy has. So I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation. So Amy's on a mission to create positive and inclusive drinking experiences for all and to normalize non-alcoholic drinking in Australia. Using her extensive knowledge and expertise in the sector, she connects her customers with the best quality non-alcoholic drinks that are suited to their individual tastes. Amy believes that by removing the stigma around non-alcoholic drinking and creating the best possible experience for her customers, they are more likely to stay on track with their health goals and enjoy a social and rewarding life sans alcohol. Choosing a life without alcohol has had a massive impact on Amy's life. The personal growth she's experienced over the 2 years is incredibly significant. So first of all, Amy's coming to us from a little town called Port Fairy in Australia, assuming it's on the coast because it's called Port Fairy. Yes. So it's like 8:30 Amy's time at night and 7:30 in the morning my time. So I said, oh, great. We're both tired. So we have brought our energy. I will say this. I don't know Amy. I only know Amy from Instagram, but I've been following her now for quite a while on Instagram, and her Instagram feed is so fun. And I just feel like, without even knowing Amy, that you're going to bring the energy to this podcast because your feed is so energetic, bright, colorful. And I expect that that's a big piece of, what you're trying to promote in terms of this alcohol-free lifestyle and industry that you're involved in.
Yes, that it's not all drab and dour and boring.
Yeah.
Because when I stopped drinking, I really thought that life was going to be drab and dour and all of those things. And I very quickly discovered that it wasn't. So it is something that I really do want to communicate with people. And by having fun on my Instagram, it's a good way of doing it.
Yeah, you do a great job of it. And then that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, is because people do think that, people have preconceived notions around, just the very word sobriety scares people off, because it sounds so awful and boring and negative. And obviously I don't believe that. And, I'm out trying to convince people that life is actually a million times better without alcohol. But I just love your approach. I think it's so fun. So we're going to talk about tell everybody what your company name is.
So it's Dry But Wet.
And what's that about?
Very cheeky little name thought up by my husband. And that sort of just came about because obviously being sober is dry, you're not drinking, but I'd still drink an awful lot of drinks. So a cheeky little play on that.
I think it's awesome. And we're going to talk more about this, but you're just back from England. I followed your trip on Instagram. You had some great stories and videos about what was happening. So can you tell everybody what you were doing there?
Yes, that was an incredible opportunity. I was invited by an organisation called the International Wine and Spirits Competition. They're a well-known and well-established wine and spirits competition. They've been running since the 60s, I think. And they now have a really growing non-alcoholic section. It's been running for 3 years, growing massively every year, and they invited me over to judge in that. So I spent 2 days drinking an awful lot of non-alcoholic drinks and putting my brain to the test. And while I was there, it was just a wonderful opportunity. I feel like what's happening over in the UK is like they're at the forefront of this current sort of movement of alcohol-free living, and it was so exciting to be there in this week where so much stuff happened that kind of proved that to me.
Yeah, that's so fun. And so is that something that you did at all before you became alcohol-free? We're going to talk about your story around alcohol in a second, but you're alcohol-free now. You've been alcohol-free for a couple of years, right?
Yes. Yeah. 2 years in June it was. Yeah.
So is this tasting something that was part of your life before? I mean, obviously we're all experts at tasting alcoholic beverages if we're alcohol free. Most of us are anyway. But did you have any training in on the tasting side of things as a sommelier, or as no?
No technical experience at all. And I was a cheap drinker. So, but what I feel like I've always had this like need to share my opinions on something. I've always been like the person who, like, I have friends who have restaurants and they'll be like, oh, what did you think about that? What did you think about that?
Right.
And for me to like start drinking these non-alcoholic drinks and having opinions on them for myself, that was something that I really wanted to share. And just because of the work that I've been putting into it, I've just got the product knowledge. And what going and judging in that IWSC competition proved to me is that I'm actually do know what I'm talking about for some reason.
Right. So was that
sitting in a...
Sorry, I just wanted to interrupt. No, I was just curious if that was, I think I missed the name of the festival, but were there alcoholic beverages there as well, or was it purely non-alcoholic?
This was the non-alcoholic section. So they'd done all the wine and spirits tasting competition earlier in the year. So this was purely, well, they call it no and low.
Right.
Anything under 1.2%, I think.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. It's so great that they have a whole category for that now.
And it's grown like crazy. Like I think entries were up 225% on last year or something like that. Like it's just mad how big it is.
Yeah, well, maybe you can speak to that before we get into your story, because I think I've been following this trend especially during the pandemic, and it does feel like, I mean, I believe alcohol-free drinks are the fastest growing sector of the adult drink industry. Is that, am I on the right track there?
Yeah, it's growing so exponentially. The new releases of products that I'm seeing weekly just blows my mind. And I know that there in Canada you are, for some reason, it's trudging a little bit slowly behind there. But you know, even what's available to you there's some still really good quality stuff. But the demand is there, and I think it's gaining momentum so quickly because the more people see that there's money to be made in this category, the more then people are getting involved. Alcohol brands are getting involved. They're making alcohol-free versions of their drinks, and it's just gaining momentum really quickly, which is great because the more it happens, the more the quality is going to rise and people are going to be pushed to be innovating in the space. So it's a very exciting time to be involved.
Yeah, and this is not your mother's non-alcoholic Christmas wine, people. Like, it's so different than, you know, what it was. Even my experience with non-alcoholic wine is, I'll be honest, it's not massive. And I was saying to Amy before we hit record, it's because where I am in Canada, there's very little available. So the selection is very, very small. And I've tried just about everything out there. I have a couple that I talk about on the podcast that I quite like. So we have a local vineyard called Benjamin Bridge that makes a product called Piquette, which is it's like a wine-like beverage. And that is available now at some restaurants, which is nice because there's at least an option, not very many. But I've said before on this podcast, I think one of the most impactful things we can do as consumers is let restaurants know that we would love to see that on their menu and actually give them suggestions. Yeah. A lot of them have no idea what even the right ones look at might be. So I always give a suggestion whenever I'm at a restaurant or a nice pub. I'll say, oh, here's a great beer that's local, that's non-alcoholic, or here's, a suggestion for a couple of wine products you might want to have. The other one that I like that's available here, which I'm sure you've tried, is Groovy Dry Secco, which is good. And we can get that in the grocery stores here. They have a new dry red, which I just read won the bronze at some recent wine competition. And I can't find that, so I haven't tried that one yet, but it's really limited here. But I will say it tastes nothing like the non-alcoholic wine that we gave my dad for years when he was sick and he couldn't drink alcohol anymore. Which I remember at one point, like taking a mouthful of that and spitting it out in the sink. It was so horrible. That was when I was, I think probably the early years of that, I was still drinking alcohol. Anyway, it's an evolving industry here in Canada, but it's definitely leaps and bounds ahead in the UK, leaps and bounds ahead in Australia, and quite a bit further ahead in the United States too, which is why it's so baffling to me that we don't have more available here.
Close to the US.
Yeah, we're heavily regulated though. Like our liquor stores here are government owned. So it's tricky, like the privatization of the alcohol and non-alcoholic beverage industries. I don't know what the rules are around that. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I do want to talk about your experience.
Take a deep dive there, couldn't we?
It doesn't really matter, because I do believe that it will eventually happen here. We tend to be a bit slower. We're a little more cautious. That serves us really well as Canadians. A lot of the time we take our time with things, but in this particular sphere, I'm looking forward to it starting to change. And so I really want to hear about your experience in both Australia and recently in the UK around that. So before we get into all of that, which I think is cool, and your story about how you got into this industry, let's talk a little bit about your story around alcohol. Because I know you serve, I want to be really clear before we get going, you serve your customers that you serve, and your following on Instagram is largely sober curious, not alcohol free. Is that right?
Yeah. So for the first year of me running my business, or 8 months or whatever, I thought everyone who I was talking to was sober just like me. And it wasn't until I started actually doing some market research and actually working out how to build my business that I found out that the majority of people are still drinking, or they are sober curious and just looking to cut back and just being more mindful about how they are drinking. So that was a big surprise to me and made me realize that I need to change how I talk to everyone all the time, because I'm not just talking to myself.
Yeah, I love that. I try to remember that too. Just because I'm alcohol free doesn't mean that's the road for everybody. And so many of the people who listen to this podcast are still drinking and not questioning their relationship with alcohol at all, which is fine. But I also know that women are looking for options to help them drink less, even if they don't have a problematic relationship with alcohol. For a lot of women, it's because they're exhausted, they're burnt out. The women who listen to this podcast are tired. And they're also, a lot of them are in perimenopause and or menopause. And we know there's such a direct correlation between alcohol and many of those really troublesome symptoms of hormonal, the hormones shifting, including hot flashes and difficulty sleeping. And so they're looking for options too. And it's kind of my dream that we get to a place where it's just so normal for someone to be at a party and be drinking non-alcoholic drinks because they just don't feel like drinking that night. And I think that this whole industry is what's going to help do that. So instead of showing up and just being the person at the party with the terrible alcohol-free beer or the, sparkling water with lime, we actually have some options. So I wanted to set that out up front, because this podcast isn't about not drinking. This podcast is about starting to take back your power around the alcohol industry. And if there are nights or weeks or months where you don't feel like drinking, we want to talk to you about and make sure you understand how many options there are out there, and that you're not alone in that. This is a huge growing movement, this sober curious movement. People just thinking, okay, I've just been drinking too much, especially post-pandemic. The rates of drinking have just skyrocketed because of the levels of stress that we've been under for the last few years. And we just want to normalize that and celebrate it, because it's actually a really fantastic little silver lining that came out of the pandemic, I think, as people are starting to question it and think about it more. And then, of course, we have all this recent research in the last couple of years around the health risks of alcohol, especially for women with breast cancer. And so I know a lot of the women that I talk to want to drink less because that's causing stress for them. Just what would normally have been considered, sort of like moderate drinking is now here in Canada and the United States, and I don't know I believe in Australia as well, it's now not considered moderate drinking. So, the recommendation now that's coming out of the big health organizations here is no amount of alcohol is really safe or healthy. Yeah. So,
well, I mean, like with you mentioning cancer there, the risks of breast cancer increase so exponentially with every drink you have. It's just that statistic is just baffling to me. And when I was drinking, I had no idea. No idea. I'd either never heard it or just chosen to completely blanket because it hasn't hit home for me until now. And just interesting with you talking about women wanting to change their habits. I'm in my circle of friends here where I live, I'm the only person I know that doesn't drink, but I've watched over the last 2 years with my behavior changing, how that's impacted my friends. And even though they're still drinkers and they're happy to drink, they will buy non-alcoholic wine to have during the middle of the week or to have a night off. Like it's a thing, like they will all, and they'll tell me about it, like they'll get all excited and be like, oh, I tried this one this time. And it's like, it's so good to see just the consideration of this as an option to drink less and to improve your health and just be more mindful about what you're doing. It's not something that I ever would have considered ever because I loved drinking too much. But to see people who do have a much healthier relationship with alcohol be able to consider it and be able to actually implement it and bring it into their lives, it's so great, and it so gives me such a full heart,
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would say if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking to yourself, oh, that's just not an option for me to try the non-alcoholic, I would listen to that voice. I would continue listening to that voice because, the truth is, and we've said this before in the podcast, and this isn't what this podcast is about, but I just felt like this is tied into what you just said. And the truth is that if you're questioning a relationship with alcohol, you're asking yourself, do I have a problem? You probably do. And if you're listening and you're thinking, oh, there's no way I would ever try anything non-alcoholic, I would listen to that voice and I would dig into that with some curiosity too. Like, what's that about? And I would try this. I would do an experiment around this a day or two a week and just see. And if it's really, really hard for you, then that's some pretty good evidence as well. So it's all about curiosity. As you know, you're familiar with this Naked Mind. That's my approach in coaching. It's all about curiosity. It's not about judgment, but just pay attention to this. Is it easy for you to swap out your alcoholic beverage for something delicious that's non-alcoholic a couple of times a week, or is that really, really hard? Okay, let's start with your story. So tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe just start wherever feels like the right place to start when it comes to your story with drinking and alcohol.
Yeah. So I grew up in New Zealand. I'm not Australian. This is like the Canadian USA thing. You do not call me Australian. New Zealanders are the most parochial people in the whole wide world, I think. So I grew up in New Zealand, went to university there, decided after I finished university to move to Australia. And I think I drank a lot when I was at university, didn't really have, I wouldn't have considered it to be problematic. It was just a normal way of drinking, which is probably the problematic part of it, was how much you drink at university is normal. But moved to Australia and sort of felt like I was like leaving the home, leaving the confines of tiny New Zealand and like exploring this exciting new city and this exciting new life. And I discovered nightclubs and started going out all weekend, every weekend, not only drinking but taking drugs and just going like crazy because I was having the time of my life. But that after a couple of years of that and being quite unwell with that quite regularly, I started to feel like it was too much, and I sought out counselling at that point to be like I think I know I'm doing the wrong thing here. And the bloke's like, yeah, you are, but you've come to talk to me, so you're clearly aware of what you're doing. You just keep doing what you're doing and rein it in a little bit. So I was in the process of doing that and not going out so much and cutting down on drugs and not drinking so much. And I met my husband then, or my now husband then, who, as soon as we started going out, wanted me to stay at home and watch television with him and not go out dancing or do anything fun at all. He was just like a super homebody. We're in a relationship, so we should be at home watching movies together. And I went, no, like, you can't tell me that. And so I kept going out, kept dancing. We kind of clashed on that from the get-go, but wanted to stay together. But he was constantly trying to rein in my drinking and I was constantly pushing against it. And that was like a pattern that then was set for, that was 2006. So I don't know what that maths is, a lot of years. He moved me out of Melbourne. He left Melbourne. He went to live in coastal New South Wales and said, I'm going, you can come with me if you like. This was a year into our relationship. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, I'll go with you. And so we were there. We were quite isolated. We had no friends. We relied on each other very much for our social lives. And whilst I say he liked to stay in and watch TV, he also was very much a drinker. So he would like go and play golf in the mornings, then go to the pub, want to watch horse racing all afternoon and drink that whole time. But then he would want to be in bed and asleep by 7:30 or 8 o'clock. So because we were kind of joined at the hip in this town where we didn't know anyone, I just started drinking like him. So we would quite regularly have champagne breakfasts. And on a Saturday, I'd be there to pick him up at the golf club at 11 and drinking then heavily for the whole day. So I learned to drink, have these massive long drinking sessions and drink like a bloke, essentially. And that kind of just set in a pattern that would just continue on. We stayed there for 5 years and eventually made friends with other people, and I sort of pushed back a little bit against that and started doing my own thing a little. But once we moved here to Port Fairy, which is his hometown where he grew up, and had our daughter, that's, I think, where what was sort of a happy-go-lucky drinking together in the afternoon kind of relationship started to go a little bit awry. I found that with having my daughter, I had like a serious identity crisis, or I thought that my life was over and that I was never going to be able to do any of the things, party anymore, or just go out drinking anymore, or doing any of the things that I love doing anymore. I thought it was all over, and there was life before baby and there was life after baby, and the two didn't line up at all. I had a massive freak out about that for the first 5 or 6 months, and then once I started to realize that I could go and do things, anytime I was going to do anything, I was drinking as much as humanly possible in that little window that I had. So if I was going out for dinner with a girlfriend, I'd get through, a bottle of wine and she could sit there and have one glass and I would just be inhaling that wine. And that then became quite a serious pattern that just escalated. So my daughter's now 6, so escalated over those 6 years and really only intensified, I think, with the pandemic. And that pattern and behaviour of drinking, of drinking heavily as fast as I could and as often as I could in social situations, really started to put a lot of strain on my relationship at home, which then just caused more drinking. So it became a real chicken and egg cycle where I was getting told constantly, you can't get that drunk, you shouldn't be drinking that much, you're starting to get quite belligerent when you are drunk. I was being made to feel guilty for that all the time, and then that meant that I would then drink more and become more belligerent when I was drunk and more resentful, and it was just like a snowballing sort of a situation. I mean, I should say that at this point I still was really only drinking it on the weekends. I was never drinking every day. It was very much a binge situation of like the Friday night, Saturday night, and that would probably be it. It would be that, and then remorse for a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then back into it again. So much so that I was banned from drinking wine in the house. Like there was no wine in the house ever, because unless we had like a special occasion where we might have shared some champagne together. His theory was that if I drank beer, then I couldn't get as drunk as quick because, you know, lower percentage of alcohol. So I drank a lot of beer with him. And then if I was ever out by myself or away for work or whatever, it was just like, how much red wine can I drink?
Right. Yeah.
And in that time, like I got myself into some quite sticky situations. I would be in the city in Melbourne away for work or with a girlfriend and not, you know, be blacked out, not know where I was for long periods of time. I ended up in hospital a few times with injuries. I broke my arm. I fell over after a big day of Bruce Springsteen, broke my arm, and I had a 1-year-old at the time, so that was far from ideal. And so over when those things were happening, like falling over and breaking my arm, I'd have like big periods of, oh my God, what am I doing? I went through drug and alcohol counselling, like in person here twice over like one block in 1 year and then maybe another block a year later. And that was always sort of just focused on moderating, you know, this is how you can try to drink less and take control back and all of those things. And it's funny, I very distinctly remember at that time, one of the counsellors said, oh, you should have a listen to this woman, this Annie Grace, have a listen to her podcast. And I listened to that first episode. And in that, Annie talks about her experience and then this idea of living a life free from alcohol. And I remember listening to it and thinking, this chick's crazy. I can't imagine a life without alcohol. Like it just pinged straight off my brain. Like there was no way that was a possibility. So at that time, I wasn't even ready to consider it. But moderating didn't work.
Tell us about that. Like, let's take a second on the moderation piece, because I always love to hear a good moderation story because I was trying to moderate for about 5 years before I stopped drinking. So what did that look like for you? Typically that idea of trying to moderate, so a question for you, were you making rules around, because I always say it's impossible to moderate without rules. Like you have to know what successful moderation would look like for you in order to know whether you're actually moderating or not. Yeah. So the idea was to like set limits on drinks for the evening or for the day, set like on numbers, to always drink a water in between drinks. One was like, why don't you drink mid-strength beer instead of full-strength beer? Yeah, I could do that. But my heart was never in any of it because I never at that time recognized that I had a problem. I was going and doing this counseling because I was remorseful for whatever stupid thing I'd done when I was drunk. Right.
But I never deep down inside believed that I had a problem because no one had ever called me out on it except for my husband. So I thought that he was being overbearing and controlling, but he was just the person who was closest to it.
Right.
So yeah, they got me to write a little list of things that I should think about when I'm drinking, like, you know, my daughter being proud of me and things I'll be able to achieve. Like I had this little green card that I kept in my wallet that I was supposed to pull out anytime I was going drinking to remind myself of all the things that I should be thinking about. But for me, like the nature of alcohol, it just doesn't lend itself to moderation. Like as soon as you've had 2 drinks, that water in between drinks kind of disappears pretty quickly because you're like, I don't need that anymore. And, I'll just have one more, and just one more. And the chemistry, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, this assumption that somehow we're still in charge after we've had a drink is kind of ridiculous. And I've always loved that saying about, first you take a drink, then the drink takes a drink, then the drink takes you. Because you only really, that first drink is the only one you're really standing in full control and power over. And then after that, your brain is affected by the alcohol. Your neurochemistry is off. So any expectation that it's going to be easy for you to limit yourself to only 2 drinks or only 3 drinks is just so flawed at its core. So what happened that caused you to, how did you eventually get to a place where you did embrace this idea that maybe life might be better without it? Like how did that all happen for you?
Well, so during the first 6 months of lockdown here, I got shocking anxiety. Like as soon as we went into lockdown, it was like, oh, this is not for me. Really bad anxiety. Got put on antidepressants by my doctor. Antidepressants said, don't drink. What did I do? Kept drinking, and like lockdown drinking. So, that pattern of starting to bring in a couple of knockoff drinks every day. But what was happening with being on those meds was I was starting to get sick or black out after like 6 drinks, 6 beers. So I was disappearing off a ledge of consciousness really, really quickly, and being quite a big pain in the ass. And because it was just us at home, it was just like a pressure cooker situation. So I was starting to just behave really poorly, and I was starting to get really sick of myself. Like I knew I had conversations with my husband saying, I'm so sick of this, but I don't know what to do anymore. I can't control this. And I got a very random message from a friend who I was at high school with, someone in New Zealand. She's reached out to me and said, hey, Amy, hope you're going all right. I've become sober recently and wanted to chat to you about some of the things that happened in high school that I think really affected our relationship, and that was around drinking, and would you be up for a chat? And I was like, okay, got nothing else to do, let's Zoom. And so I did, and she totally told me her story. She'd done the alcohol experiment, and it was one of those light bulb conversations where everything she said was like, oh, that's me. Oh, that's me. I can relate to that. Oh, God. And she said, the change that had happened in her life was just incredible. The complete turnaround, and this idea that she could enjoy all the things in life almost better than she had been when she was drinking, because that was always my fear, is that nothing would be the same. Anytime I'd had a period of abstinence, like say when I was pregnant, I hated it, and I hated not drinking, and it was like hanging on for dear life, and I thought that that's what not drinking was going to be. So her having that really honest conversation with me just totally inspired me, and I looked at the alcohol experiment and I thought, I think it's time for this.
Can I interrupt for 1 second, Amy?
Yeah.
I just want to, for anybody who's listening, when we're talking about the alcohol experiment, I just want them to know what it is we're talking about. So we're talking about the alcohol experiment that you can do anytime for free online with Annie Grace. If you just Google the free alcohol experiment, you'll find it. It's a 30-day alcohol experiment. There are also sometimes coach-led live alcohol experiments that are run. They're being run now. I think the next one is in January of 2023. So they're not being run as regularly now, but you can do those as well. So did you do a coach-led version, Amy, or you did the free one? Yeah, me too. That's it. And so Amy's saying that she went through the free alcohol experiment online where you get a little video every day. And I did as well. In fact, I love that approach so much that a friend of mine who's also a certified This Naked Mind coach, Emily Lynn Paulson, and I created a women's version of the alcohol experiment that we call Rewind, which is a 6-week version. But I just love that, getting those little short videos every day in my inbox, and just feeling like someone was in my corner. And also obviously the main thing about the alcohol experiment that's so novel and new is that it really focuses in on what you're going to get, and paying attention to what you're getting from being alcohol free, as opposed to what you have to give up.
Yeah.
So you signed up for that. And what was your experience with it?
Well, I signed up for that, and then I didn't start it. I went on a really boozy long lunch. So we had like a little window in between lockdowns, and I was like, right, I'm going to have well, I didn't think it was my last hurrah. I just thought I was going out for lunch, but it went downhill very quickly. And I just woke up the next morning. I was like, okay, I don't know what I did. You don't need to tell me what I did, but that is it. I'm done. I'll start the alcohol experiment right now. So it was like a real nail in the coffin. But my experience with the alcohol experiment was like, I often say it's like being in a cult. I drank the Kool-Aid, and I am a believer, and I'm in, and it's just like every single lesson in that has stuck with me so firmly. And it's like it changes your brain chemistry so that you realize everything that you've been missing out on. You realize everything that you think that alcohol is giving you, you actually have all along. You realize that there's just so much. I gained so much from doing it, and like the community that you jump into along with that, like the Facebook group, was just great to find other like-minded people who are on the same journey, to hear everyone's stories. Everyone's having this similar experience, like to feel not alone in being this shocking, person who couldn't control their alcohol, and no longer feeling the guilt and the blame for any of that was just incredible. So I did it, and I literally never looked back. I had a sober community in the app that I was doing, the day counting app. I can't even remember what it was called, but I just found those little pockets of support. And I hate to say that it was easy, but it just felt quite effortless, and like it all just clicked into place and just worked for me.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes it does. A lot of the time it does. I think people, some people do it many times. There's some people who do it many times. So what I always say is it's a matter of readiness. I think, and it sounds like you were ready. It sounds like you were at that place where you just realized, like, I can't keep going this way. Something has to change. And I think if you're ready and you're open to it, if you can go into it with some openness, so that probably for you, that openness came from the conversation with your friend and just hearing her experience with it and how her life has been transformed. I think if you go into it with openness and curiosity, and you really try hard to drop all the assumptions that you have around how it's going to go and what it's going to be like. And if you sort of view it as, this is just an opportunity for me to give myself a break. I just it's a gift here. I'm giving myself just like a month where I don't have to think about drinking, like actively the process of drinking. And it can be really transformative for people, but it's also okay if you have to do it more than once. And a lot of people do it many, many times before they get there. Everyone has a different path, but I do love hearing the stories. And it's very similar to mine, in that by the time I got to the alcohol experiment, I was done. I was sick of my own stuff. I remember, I've said this before on the podcast, sitting in a chair about 3 weeks before I did the experiment, drinking and thinking, I don't even know if I like this anymore. Like, I'm not even sure why I'm doing this anymore. And then continuing to drink because I was hooked on it. But I just had gotten to that place where I was just so sick and tired of everything to do with drinking and my own life, like just how it was playing out. I'm curious to know, when you were talking about your experience in the alcohol experiment, if you had the same epiphany I had, which was that So many of the things that I was drinking to escape from, and I'm putting that in air quotes, or to like manage or handle or make less difficult, were actually caused by alcohol. And so when I removed alcohol, it was like, oh gosh, like the problem is, the solution is actually the problem. Like it was so interesting to me. Did you notice that?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yes and no. So it didn't, I thought it might fix all of my relationship worries straight away, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
That's been a long, ongoing process, because there's a lot of trust that I guess has to be rebuilt in that. But yeah, like, I mean, alcohol creates stress. Do you think that alcohol's removing your stress? And really it's not at all. It's hiding it for an hour and then it comes back tenfold, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah, really does.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. That was my main thing. It was stress and anxiety for me were the main reasons why I drank. But then when I took alcohol away, I realized, oh, wow, I have hardly any stress or anxiety. Yeah. Like, wow, this isn't rocket science. I don't know why it took, however many, 10 years, a decade for me to think about taking a break from this thing just to see. But so that's wonderful. So then how did you get from that? So were you working at the time, first of all? So when you're drinking like this and you have your daughter, what are you doing? Are you working?
Yes, I was working at a university here near where I live. I was working 4 days a week, very high-paced, big responsibility job. I was working in administration. I was managing finance and events and communications and marketing, and I absolutely loved my job. I loved being able to go away for work. I always maxed out those work trips and drank all the drinks. I would often say, thanks, Deacon, because we could go to all these events and drink the free booze. And so yeah, when I stopped drinking, I was still working there. I was still working from home, which was hard, especially with a little kid. And we experienced a couple of restructures that were really, really brutal. And I survived them, but in the end, it all became too much. And I'd already started my business by that time, and I realized how much joy and energy and life I was getting from running my own business. And I was like, I can't deal with this business anymore. It's like it kind of died. It became part of my past life almost. I lost all the joy in it. I didn't want to be there anymore. And I was lucky that I was able to step away from it.
So how did you get into this non-alcoholic drinks industry? Like, what was the transition there?
Well, it really only, it began on a whim. Since stopping drinking, I was just making lists of drinks that I'd been trying. So I went quite hard straight away trying to find good non-alcoholic wine replacements, specifically a red wine replacement. So I just had lists of what I'd bought, what was crap, what was drinkable, so I knew what to order again. And I had a girlfriend around one day, and she's like, if you became an Instagram influencer, you might get some free drinks. And I was like, oh, free drinks, I could do free drinks, but I don't know if I could be on Instagram like that. She's like, just do it. So she set it up. My husband came up with the name, and I just started posting photos of drinks and writing a 2-line review about it. And 6 months down the track, I had a website developed to collate all of their reviews, and I was starting to petition hospitality to offer better non-alcoholic options. And then once we got out of lockdowns here in Melbourne, I started being able to host tasting events, and it's just really naturally snowballed to the point where I am now working in it full time. And I have contract work that I'm doing for businesses, and I'm doing consultancies for hospitality venues, and I'm running my events, and I'm loving it.
So
as well as reviewing, as well as keeping on top of all of the new products. You should see how much non-alcoholic drink I have in my house.
I can only imagine. I watch you doing the tastings and the reviews and things on the Instagram page. And I think, oh my gosh, you must have just like a room full of this stuff. And I'm envious of it because, as I said, we don't have yet a huge selection available, certainly not on the eastern side, the Atlantic section of Canada that I'm in. It's very hard to find a variety of things, and ordering things online can get super expensive depending on where they're coming from. And so I'm hoping that this starts to grow here, but was a red wine drinker, and I have never found a red wine that isn't complete and utter garbage. So I'm always fascinated. I'm fascinated by, you're like, just awful. So I found a couple whites, as I said, white wine was never really my thing, but I'll drink those. If I'm going to a party, I'll get a couple of those to take with me or something. And occasionally I'll drink them at home. And we have a pretty great non-alcoholic craft beer industry here. Lots of good options available, and that's just growing all the time. But on the wine side of things, it's really challenging. So what are what's your favorite red? Have you found a good one yet? Because I watch them. Sometimes you leave them with little teasers, and then I'm like, I don't know. Was this good? Was this not good? I don't know what her verdict was on it. So
you have to go to the website.
I know. I guess I do. Yeah. So with the website, let's give the website right now, just so that people listening know. So it's drybutwet.com.au. If you're looking for recommendations, I'm going to go there. I don't know whether any of them are available here, but I'd be curious to find out.
What is available to you in Canada? I had a little scopy before. You can order online from Better Roads Canada, and they do have the Naughty Rouge, which is a Syrah red wine, and that is very good.
Oh, good. Okay, I'm going to try that for sure then. Okay.
There's also on all of my red wine reviews, I link to a blog that I wrote about how to get the most out of your non-alcoholic red wine and how to mentally prepare yourself for drinking non-alcoholic red wine, because there's a whole piece of work that has to go with it. It's never going to be the same as alcoholic red wine.
No.
But that Naughty Syrah is good. And if you open it a long time before you intend to drink it, that will help. Don't open it and pour it and drink it.
Interesting. Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah. It needs oxidization to stop tasting so fruity.
So the Naughty sparkling, I feel like it's a Chardonnay maybe or is it sparkling Chardonnay? I ordered that for my 20th wedding anniversary last summer. And I was saying to Amy before we hit record, I ordered it from the States, and with like duties, taxes, shipping, everything, it ended up being like $100 bottle of non-alcoholic, not even champagne, but a sparkling wine. And it was decent. We all, like, my kids had a glass. We all had a glass. We did a toast with it. It was nice. It was a special occasion. It wasn't that big of a deal, but I wonder if that one's available on Better Roads too, because that was a decent. Yeah. Okay, great. So I'll have to go look at that website.
There's not an awful lot on there, but there's a couple of good options. So there's the Naughty, and there's also Leitz, which is a German brand. They've got sparkling wine in a can there. That is also really, really nice.
How do you spell that?
Leitz.
Oh, okay. Perfect. I'll take a look at that too. And so, okay, forget about Canada, forget about what's available here. What have you been surprised by in terms of the wine industry, especially in the last year or so?
Just how quickly it's improved and how it's actually being taken seriously. So I was lucky enough to go to a wine awards here in Sydney earlier in the year, and it was run by a pompous, stuffy wine snob organization with proper wine judges, and for them to be taking a wine category seriously, it was just mind-blowing. A non-alcoholic wine category seriously was mind-blowing. So if they're recognizing that the change is happening, then that's so exciting. And I've seen it, like, even in the last 6 months, the makers are starting to take it a lot more seriously. They're using a lot better quality grapes, and they're starting to it's not just a non-alcoholic white wine. You're starting to see a lot more varietal and really location-specific grapes being used. So, like for here in Australia, we're starting to see like Barossa Valley Shirazes being made, or there's a Clare Valley Chardonnay that's about to come out. So and that just shows that they're taking it seriously, and they're because when you don't have alcohol to hide behind, the quality of what you are using really, really makes a difference. So if you're using cheap grapes, it's going to show when you don't have anything to hide behind. So yeah, the biggest surprise has just been the quality, and the joy for me of being so immersed in this category has just been finding new exciting drinks to taste that don't taste like anything else. Like there's a whole category of drinks that I call alternatives, that are just things that are adult, they're incredibly flavoursome, but they don't seek to replicate alcohol at all, and they can be incredible. And the producers who are making them have the ability to just like push and pull in all directions, and they're not following any rules. They're not trying to fit into a box. They can do what they want and invent new flavor experiences. So tasting some of those has just been mind-blowing.
Can you give me an example of a few of those that are some of your favorites from that category?
Well, they're all Australian.
Oh, are they? Are you talking about like a shrubby based type drink, or what's okay?
So one of my favorites that's made in Melbourne, it's called Tina, this is not alcohol.
Yeah.
And it's an oolong tea based drink.
Oh.
So it's oolong tea and then just all these other botanicals. It's slightly carbonated, but it's so complex and tasty, and it's like nothing else you've ever tried.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Yeah. I've been trying to find those as well. So just things that are not even trying to be alcohol, but that have a bit of an adult flavor to them. And I always say some of my favorites from the beginning here, we have a lot of kombucha available, a lot of different varieties of kombucha. So that's was my kind of go-to in the early days. And I would mix it with sparkling water just to give it a little like zip. Cause I found it to be quite sweet just to drink on its own. But not a lot of other stuff here. And some of the options, I tried, I'll always buy it. If it's there, I will try it. So I found this is actually a few months ago, I bought a non-alcoholic, like Aperol Spritz kind of substitute. So awful. So not good. And then there was also a pre-mixed sort of gin and tonic-y type thing that's also just horrid. In terms of non-alcoholic spirits though, I do love, there are a couple of different non-alcoholic gin options that I think are delicious that I love. So we're making cocktails with those, and we can get those here. So I can get Lyre's here, and I can get, I actually don't remember the name of the other one that I've been getting, but it's at like a little store where my cottage is. They sell it and it's delicious. I think it's from France. It's so good. Those are available, but in terms of the mixed drinks, we just don't have the same variety here. And the thing about those, I assume, Amy, is that when you say they're adult beverages, it's not a flavor that would appeal to a child. It's not like a tropical juice box. It's got a very unique adult flavor, sometimes a little bit of an acquired taste, often a bit of a fermentation flavor in it. And those are the ones that I presume you're talking about.
Yeah, so there's another Melbourne-based range, they're called Non, and they've got a range of 7 different drinks. These were developed in response to needing an adult option for a non-alcoholic option for fine dining for a pairing menu. And they are like off the charts, like totally things that you would never think of drinking. Like my favorite one is stewed cherry and coffee, and it's got like garam masala in it, verjuice. They've often got a tea base in them to give you tannins. So they want to have like the wine characteristics of tannin and acid and spice, warmth, but they're totally their own thing, and it's so tasty.
You know,
I definitely not give it to a child.
Yeah, no, I know. I think it's important too, because a lot of people who are drinkers will say, oh, I love the taste of, I love the wine. I love the red wine. And that for me, when I read This Naked Mind, was the one chapter where Annie Grace lost me, was the chapter where she started talking about how it actually doesn't taste good. And I remember listening to that and thinking, no, that's not true. It tastes really good. I really like the taste of it. But the thing she talks about that I do agree with is the fact that it didn't always taste good to me, and it was an acquired taste. Like when I think back to the very first time I drank, I mean, alcohol just does not taste good the first time we drink it. And obviously we do all of these things to cover up the flavor of the ethanol itself, the alcohol, including adding sugar and, you know, flavors and all kinds of stuff to it. And so when you were, you know, when we were talking, I was thinking about that the fact that some of these other drinks, these alternative drinks, also have those same properties. And when you taste them the first time, you don't love them. It's interesting because, for example, the Benjamin Bridge Piquette that I was talking about, and Benjamin Bridge is quite a well-renowned winery here. That when I first tried that, I thought, that is not my thing. That is not I don't enjoy that. But it's the only thing on the menu at a restaurant that we go to fairly regularly. And I really like the experience. I always ask for like a nice wine glass, and I like the experience of that with a meal. And so
what kind of a drink is it?
It's a grape-based, fruit-based wine I don't know how to describe it. It's sparkling. So it's got a carbonation to it. It does not taste like a children's drink. It has a very adult flavor to it. It's, I don't know how they make it, but there's something about it that the more I drank it, the more I enjoy it. And now I order it when I go out. So it's interesting to me. I think a lot of these tastes it's like olives. I always use olives or blue cheese, right? Like I hated blue cheese. I hated olives the first time I tasted them, but now I love them both. So it might be that this is a space too, where there's some acquired taste that happens along with it. And I'm saying that more just if you're someone who's grown accustomed to the taste of an alcoholic beverage. I don't know this is going to happen overnight, that you drink it and think, this is amazing. And but it's so worth it to give yourself a chance to try it. Maybe just embrace, you know, every Monday is like mocktail Monday, or every Thursday is, you know, try something new Thursday. And, you know, you just try to put a couple of nights into your week. If you're used to having a glass of wine or two every night, you put a couple of nights into your week where you actually actively try these things. And I think you might be surprised at how that goes. I mean, even the Groovy Dry Secco, which is one of my favorites now here it's a white. I think I mentioned it earlier. It's a white, it's carbonated. It does not taste like wine. But there's something about it. Yeah. I quite enjoy it. And I think part of it, and I'm curious to know what you think about this. I think a big part of these drinks is the ritual. I think a big part of it is the experience of the drinking and what you're using the drink for. And for me, having a non-alcoholic drink, an adult non-alcoholic drink, I reserve it for circumstances where it has a meaning. So for example, it might be a transition from work to home at the end of the day. It might be a celebration with friends, a social thing. I don't drink Groovy Dry Secco at 9:00 in the morning on a Saturday. It's something that I might have it. What? I have it I'd have it in the evening as a drink, or at the end of on a Friday night, for example, to mark the beginning of the weekend, or socially when I'm out with friends. But the ritual that's associated for me keeps it kind of special as well, and not an everyday ordinary drink. So
yeah, like people might assume that I'm sitting around drinking non-alcoholic drinks all day, every day, but I don't. I mostly only drink them when I'm socializing. It's still that social thing for me of the social inclusion and being part of the ritual and the taste. If I'm at home, I just drink a lot of peppermint tea.
Yeah. So you are doing tasting events now. I think this is so fascinating. Tell us about those.
I love for these. I love them. I love taking my experience and knowledge of all the wines. So I curate every event really carefully to include the best. And sometimes I'll throw in something there that is not the best so that people can taste, oh, this is a supermarket wine and this is all the other stuff that tastes a whole lot better. So they've got that compare and contrast. But, you know, even the most cynical people who come to these events walk away feeling like they've learned something and they've found their new favorite drinks and they've got a better understanding of non-alc. And I learned so much from doing them as well about how everyone's got different taste, and not just because I think something's good doesn't mean everyone will think it's good. And they're wonderful experiences. So I've been running a monthly series in Melbourne where I've done a different category every month. So I started with sparkling wine, and then I did craft beer and rosé and white wine and red wine. And this month I'm doing like ready to drink cocktails. They're great opportunities for me to do research and make sure that I'm across all of the brands and build my relationships with the brands, and then just be able to expose different people to them every month and have people have that really positive drinking experience. So I have people come who are just thinking about drinking less and just want to know more about non-alc, and I love having that positive impact on them. And it be tangible.
And you do you have some food pairings and some, you do like food. There's some food. I was looking at your pictures. Looks like it's not just drinking.
I did food at my most recent one. That was because it was for my birthday. I was like, oh, do special. I'll get some cheese. But I've also done some corporate ones. So where I've turned up at a workplace and done them in a lunch break or after work. And that's then actually even more interesting, because then you've got people who haven't paid to come. They're just people who happen to be there at lunchtime, and they're like, okay, well, I guess I'll see what this is all about. And they might have no intention of drinking less, but they try this and then they're like, oh my God, this is actually really surprisingly good, and I'm going to think about enjoying this, and I'm going to go home and order some of this. And like, to see that straight away, like, it just shows you the possibility of these drinks.
Yeah. Well, that's so interesting. What do you do? I'm going to ask you a hard question, because I know you, in some ways you've got people sending you stuff all the time. And how do you deal with it if it's just awful?
If it sort of depends on who they are. So if it's a small family business or a small business, I'll just message them and say, like, I'm not going to, go public and just cane you. I'll give you feedback privately.
Yeah.
But like big wine houses that have just done an extension brand, I have no qualms about saying this is terrible, because it is. And I mean, it's no skin off their nose, really.
Yeah.
So it just depends on who it is, how I decide to deal with it.
Your reviews then are honest on your website in terms of, these big, I didn't assume that they weren't, but I could just see how that would be. It could feel like you're in a bit of a conflicted position when people are sending you stuff all the time and you're working in this industry, but at the same time, your focus is trying to provide really great, useful guidance and honest guidance to people around this. So I wanted to just ask that. I know that's a weird question to ask, but I think if I was doing what you were doing, I would sometimes, because a lot of it is terrible. That's the truth. Like a lot of it's not great. But some of it's amazing. So I would think your credibility is even heightened whenever you do have something and you say, yeah, this is really not great. Which I did see you do once, which is why I asked you that question, because I did see that. Yeah.
Once it happened live. I did a live tasting with this French bloom, this very bougie, very expensive, and it's not even wine, it's just fancy grape juice. And I did a live and had them international, all these people on. I was like, it tastes literally like apple ties, sparkling apple juice. And I just had to say, it's not for me.
Yeah.
please don't buy this because it costs $35 a bottle.
That's good to know, because I'm going to France next week, so I will not take that. I think they sell that. I have a friend, I don't know if you've ever crossed paths with Martha Wright, but she is this Naked Mind coach, but she's also, her family, they owned a vineyard in, I want to say Oregon. She's quite a specialist in the non-alcoholic wines and drinks and that kind of thing. But I believe that's the one she was talking about, that she maybe bought at like the Ritz-Carlton or something in Paris. They had, I think it might be that one. I'll have to check with her.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be disappointing.
But it's like all wine, it's all like all drinks, all beverages, all commodities, frankly. There's, you've got to cut through the marketing and all the talk and actually find somebody who you trust, who isn't looking at any of that and who's just actually tasting it. And of course, everybody's tastes are different. And some people might like it, love it, when you don't like it. But I do appreciate that you're honest about it. I've seen that several times. So, what are you hopeful for in terms of where this all goes for you, but also for the industry?
I think for me and the industry, like the next big step is hospitality, because that's where things are lagging behind. We have seen growth in the last 6 months, but I think because hospitality is still behind overall because of the pandemic, they're not as quick on the uptake as what they could be. So really working with restaurants, working with pubs, trying to get better options in there, helping them curate wine lists, curate alcohol-free drinks lists, is really, really big for me. And also the thing that I really noticed when I was in the UK that we are lacking here, even though we've got all the drinks, the brands, we've got so much going on here in Australia, what we are lacking is that sense of unity and community that they have in the UK. Club Soda do an incredible job of connecting the sober and sober curious community and the brands and the venues, and they bring everyone together in this really wonderful way. So that's kind of what my goal is now, is to create that in a way, to start bringing people together in a more cohesive way and building that community, I guess, in a stronger sense than what it is at the moment.
Yeah, I love that. I love this. I love everything you're doing. And I wish someone was doing it close to me, or I wish I lived closer to you, in which case I would go to your events, because the idea of getting together with a bunch of people to celebrate a non-alcoholic range of drinks is just so exciting to me. Just the fact that you can get together with, what better way to show people how much is possible for you in terms of fun and a social life, alcohol-free. And so I just love that. I think it's so great that you're doing this, and I'm so happy to have been able to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much for.
It's been so lovely, Wendy.
It has. We did a pretty good job, considering we're both. I'm now awake officially, and you are probably ready for bed. So we did. I think it went really well. I just want to clarify for anyone listening that Better Roads in Canada is not roads like a street you drive down. It's RHODES. I'll put the link to betterroads.ca and also Amy's website and Amy's Instagram, which is really where I think a lot of the action happens. So that's Amy, that's at dry_but_wet, right? On Instagram.
Yep.
Yeah.
Correct.
I'll put those links in the show notes with this podcast. And I really encourage you to go and check out Amy's recommendations and reviews. And then to start advocating for yourself if you're looking for these options at more places. It's what we can do as consumers is just let restaurants know, like I do, in a really kind way. I will often say to them, like, why do you have Beck's on your menu? Like, what's behind the Beck's, because it's really horrible and I don't want to drink it anymore. And there are so many local craft breweries that you could be supporting that have delicious alcohol-free alternatives. Or if I'm, somewhere where it feels like there should be an alcohol-free, which is everywhere, frankly, but where it just seems like such an obvious place for an alcohol-free alternative and it's not on the menu, then I'll suggest a couple to them, either wines or beers. So I think, and that, actually gets people pay attention. It happens. And I'm noticing it because I'm seeing more and more options on restaurant menus. And those are the restaurants I go back to. So if people are listening and they are in the hospitality industry and they haven't thought about this yet, go and check out Amy's website, see what's there, see what's on Better Roads. And, we've got to start getting wholesalers bringing this. It needs to be brought into Canada too. So that's the other piece of this for us here in this country. But I believe it's going to change. We're just a little behind the times, as we often are here. And our variety is we're going to get the variety as well. And hopefully we'll start having events like this happening. Maybe even someday I'll be able to host one locally. So I just love your story, Amy. I love that you're out there making this so much fun. And for anyone listening who's thinking, I think I've been drinking a little too much during the pandemic, or is seriously questioning their relationship with alcohol, there are so many great alternatives out there. You just have to go and look for them. And life can be just as fun, just as social, actually better, with less alcohol in your life. Yeah. So thank you so much, Amy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Wendy.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a certified Naked Mind coach, I help busy women like you find freedom from alcohol. If you're starting to question your relationship with alcohol, you'll want to listen to my free 3-part video series where I address the top 3 myths around why you think you need to drink. Sign up now at www.wendymccallum.com/myths. That's www.wendymccallum.com/myths.